Let's bring in Jake Fischer from Yahoo Sports, who does a great job covering the NBA, who you know a little bit, to talk about some of these recent moves. And our show can finally chew on this Paul George thing that happened overnight. Paul George to the Sixers. I already saw the "Who Can Stop These Guys" graphic, and I was looking at the knees in particular. I was maybe fixating, maybe circle the knees.
Circle of the Olympics 2024, Joel Embiid. What are you doing?
So Paul George now joins Maxey, who I think got a max deal. Is that a part of the?
He got a maxi deal.
He got a maxi
4
deal
for 204.
Look, I mean, Philadelphia added to a team that, again, health is always going to be the question there. But I think it's a good fit for Paul George. I'm curious to know Jake's thoughts here. So let's start right there, Jake, and welcome aboard the show. Let's start with the headliner move so far of this offseason. Paul George to Philadelphia. Your immediate thoughts?
This was kind of the Sixers' plan for 2024 free agency, starting as early as 2023 free agency when James Harden opted in and requested a trade. The Sixers made this plan. This is Daryl Morey's master pipe dream of trying to trade him and only taking back 1-year contracts to then get into the open market this summer and be the only winning team with max cap space. And they did it. Daryl Morey did it again. As much as people want to talk, crap on him and make fun of his calculators and his spreadsheets, this was the vision and this was their guy all along, and they got him. It's kind of been a 300-day approach for this guy.
Was this vengeance?
A little bit. I mean, look, the other aspect of this, James Harden gets traded to the Clippers. The Sixers get back Clippers picks, and then they made the Clippers monumentally worse by bringing back Paul George. It's crazy.
So you touched on some of the reasons why this may be, but the Clippers put out a weird statement.
Yes, they
I
did.
guess acknowledging Paul George's time there, and it really just felt like that's what it was, an acknowledgement that he existed in their uniform, and largely failed. There was a lot of gamesmanship that played out in the media. It was just 10 days ago, where I think Woj reported that the Sixers were cooling on the idea of bringing Paul George aboard. So what do you make of how this played out and the Clippers' reaction to it?
The Clippers' statement and what Lawrence Frank had already said publicly about this, about the CBA, it can sound like an excuse, but I do think it's a reason. And what it is that it's not just that this new second apron brings, tax penalties, because Steve Ballmer could pay out the wazoo to front any team. The issues are the cap now, the rules with it hamstring a team and limit you from getting better. And what happens is if you pay into the second apron for 3 out of 5 years, which is exactly what would have happened if the Clippers brought back all of Kawhi, James Harden, and Paul George on the 3-year contracts. They would have had a pick frozen in the future and stuck in the back of the first round. They wouldn't have been able to aggregate salaries to get better. They wouldn't have had trade exceptions, and they couldn't have signed and traded and what have you. And the Clippers were afraid of paying for this team to compete in the West for 3 years and then be stuck for the next 4 from 2027 to 2032 in this brand new stadium with no means to get better in an absolute, team. So that was kind of their fear here. They were saving themselves now from a potential doomsday future. And the cost is definitely Paul George. If they gave him a 4-year deal remotely close to this, I think he would have stayed in LA.
Sticking with the Clippers, Jake, you were one of the first people to report that Russell Westbrook will be worked into a trade somewhere. Typically, when you see a guy opt into a deal and then immediately traded, it was probably a conversation that was made between the agent, the player, and the team, kind of an agreement. Why would Russell Westbrook do that? Why wouldn't he just test free agency?
To your point, there's definitely, I think, a collaborative process there with the agency XL Sports and the Clippers trying to find him a new home. The only read I have on it right now is that he wasn't necessarily certain that Russell Westbrook was going to get more than the minimum. And the minimum this year for him is 3.6. So that's a cool $400K that he made sure he got. And it's a thing all around the league right now. Chris Paul signing with San Antonio. He avoids a situation like he would have had to in Phoenix or LA, where he would have been on the minimum. And that's a cold, hard reality for a lot of veterans once they do decline. Once you get on a minimum contract, it's really, really hard to get above it. And that $400,000 gap, that's not nothing for these guys, even though they've made $100 million throughout their career, $200 million throughout their career. So I think there was some appropriate fear, I guess, or skepticism on their side that he was going to actually have opportunities above that minimum number.
One of the big names that's going to be on the move, we just don't know where, is Klay Thompson. The Warriors haven't put out a weird statement, but they've kind of we've gotten the flags that his time
There's
is
some
done.
traction out there for Dallas. And that is like such a Dallas Mavericks pickup. Is so their identity. Let's turn a superstar into a role player type of guy, and he could really help.
He could help, and they have that Tim Hardaway traded player exception that they can, if they can work something out, they can get him in. Jake, what are the odds that he's wearing a Dallas Mavericks uniform at the start of next season?
I really do think right now it's between Dallas and the Lakers, where they both can kind of basically give him the same type of salary structure, somewhere around the mid-level exception. So it's just a matter of figuring out which scenario. I mean, the Lakers, I think, is more direct. They wouldn't need any type of sign and trade, I don't believe. And Dallas has options to do that. But I've been told by the cap nerds I know that Dallas can clear a way to just get their full mid-level as well and bring him in without that complication. But, Philly's been looming on the periphery here too. They've got Paul Reed's contract that is $8 million and non-guaranteed. They could waive him. They could use him in a sign and trade too. So I'm not totally discounting the Sixers either, but overnight and, so far early this morning, the word has definitely been that he's deciding between Dallas and the Lakers. And I think objectively, Dallas is clearly more positioned to help Klay Thompson compete for his 5th championship. So I think if winning ultimately rules the day, it's going to be Dallas. It's going to be, you go.
How did Orlando fall out of this? Is it just because they went and got KCP? Because I'm looking at their roster.
It's a nice move for them.
That is a nice move, but I'm thinking like, a Jonathan Isaac sign and trade doesn't get Klay Thompson done to Orlando.
Yeah. And Orlando was also sniffing around this Paul George thing as well. They were in play there. What do we make of Orlando?
So Orlando, I honestly don't believe was ever really a Klay Thompson team. I think they definitely wanted a guard. They gave that money to KCP. They were absolutely looking at Malik Monk, but Klay, approaching 35, doesn't exactly fit the timeline as well as KCP, even though KCP I think is 32, so he's not, a spring chicken like Franz and Paolo, but he, I think, fits more so from like a long-term and not a wheels falling off trajectory that Klay has kind of shown of late. So I mean, honestly, it was probably sometime last week. I checked in with someone from Golden State and I said, hey, I think this KCP Orlando thing is real. I don't think Klay has a home. And they said, yeah, we've been trying to tell people all along this Magic thing isn't legit. It just kind of leveraged that his side was trying to create. So, and honestly, I haven't said this publicly yet. I don't really think Paul George was really so real for Orlando too. Mm-hmm. That might have been some type of quid pro quo. Orlando gets a meeting, quote unquote, and it helps Orlando look good. And it helps Paul have some type of leverage as well. It's not just Philly. Like, I haven't gotten it confirmed at this juncture that Orlando even met with Paul George and that there even was a meeting scheduled, but there was just some kind of loose interest that could have happened and benefited both sides there.
Jake, buddy, we started this off wrong. Your energy is all low. How are you doing, man? I know this is the worst time of the year because it's like you don't get to sleep. Yeah, you're by your phone all the time. Tell me about your personal life during free agency.
So last night I actually got like my first night's sleep of more than 5 hours in probably 2 weeks.
Same.
Because the draft, that's another thing too. Like everyone was kind of saying yesterday on Twitter, oh, the new CBA cooled the early rush out the gates. No, the fact that the draft ended Thursday and free agency ended Sunday, as opposed to like usually there's a week for all these deals to, illegally get figured out. So we didn't have that run up here. And yeah, it's been good. We got a new foster rescue that we foster failed. Arugula. She's in the house. So that's been nice.
Arugula?
Arugula. We call her Rugi. So everything's
What,
been
can
good
you-
over here.
can
I
you
love
give-
it.
Hold on, can you give a Foster a nickname? Because now it's all confused when it goes to its actual home.
No, we failed. We adopted her. She's ours
Oh,
now.
okay.
She's my daughter. I'm a dad.
Oh, okay, all right.
Arugula.
More of a
Congratulations.
mixed
then.
green type of person, but that's a cute name.
Yeah.
Spinach.
Roogie.
Honestly, in a class with kale, overrated.
Huh.
More aesthetically pleasing than tasty.
It's peppery though.
The
Yeah.
rooster.
Jake, I do want to ask you. We know that Philadelphia is remaining aggressive, and I really wish
Yes.
that the Miami Heat would take a lesson from that recent aggression that Philadelphia's had. They are very quiet right now. They are bringing back Kevin Love. Again, same scenario playing out here for the Miami Heat. The rest of the East is getting better. Tobias Harris, by the way, goes to Detroit. That just broke.
Ew.
Yeah, I think, like, what is he pulling?
2
What
for
is
52.
Detroit doing,
Two
man?
for 52.
Dude is printing money. Printing money. Tobias
that
Harris.
is that is Detroit signing a piece that they will trade next year because in the
100%.
NBA, like, bad contracts have this bizarro value. So they're just a way station right now. But Houston, along with the Miami Heat, are these teams that we heard could be players this summer, have the capital to get something done. Right now, we're just seeing the names that we know about. Is there any chance that some superstars that we don't necessarily know are available on the market can find themselves to the Houstons, to the Miamis of the world?
So quick note on Tobias. This is also a sneaky way for the Pistons to spend a lot of the cap that they have to spend to reach 90% of the salary floor.
I don't think it's sneaky. That has to be what's going on here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Washington did it too. Like, Jonas Valanciunas, starting center for the worst place Washington
I thought I was
Wizards.
getting
That-
pranked when I saw the Jonas
Hold
Valanciunas
on.
thing.
Before we move on to answer Mike's question, I had to say, because
Yeah.
you brought up Valanciunas.
Yeah.
He was the best center on the market between him and Hartenstein.
No, Isaiah was. Hartenstein was, man. How dare you?
If I'm Jonas Valanciunas, I'm looking at my resume and I'm looking at his resume and say, I have more to show that I can do this.
But Jonas's arrow is not pointing up the way that Isaiah's is.
Sure, but like also, I am what I am right now.
Yeah.
If there's a part where we're saying, hey, who are you sure can replicate what he did this last season? It's the guy who's done it 3 or 4 or 5 years, not the guy who did it for half a season. Why did he take less than mid-level?
I don't know. Has there been someone who's gotten the full mid-level yet? I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're past. I mean, if that happens, if it did happen, I apologize. But every team I spoke to before free agency repeatedly said, oh yeah, if we can get this guy at 9-10 and still leave like, 3-4 million left to use as a traded player exception or to sign somebody else. We're in this new era now where the mid-level is so high that I don't think any team I spoke to had any plans of using that full amount.
But 10 seems criminally low when you look at the other centers on the market, what they've gotten.
If he didn't get that, honestly, I think he was looking at the minimum in certain scenarios. Yeah.
Given where he is in his career. But back to the original question, Miami,
The original
Houston.
question, Miami, Houston.
Miami, Houston. Are these franchises actually going to do something with the trade capital that they've been reserving?
The problem that Houston saw at number 3 and that Portland saw the year before at number 3 and that, Cleveland has seen in past years and Golden State when they had 7 and 14, there just aren't a lot of players right now that are available that are, on a bad team. Like Lauri Markkanen is probably the one guy that I think has actual possibility to get traded. But if you want him, the Jazz are going to look at what Mikal Bridges just got. They're going to look at what they got for Donovan Mitchell and when they got for Rudy Gobert, and they're going to say, give us 5-6 unprotected picks. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to be something a team wants to do unless they really figure out and believe that Lauri Markkanen is the missing piece. I've heard Golden State and San Antonio and Sacramento as the teams that have most checked on him. But at this point, I think it's still a little touch too early to have. The Jazz can still renegotiate and extend Lauri Markkanen that begins as early as August 6th. And every indication I've had is that they're trying to do that and add to him right now. But that's the guy.
So
that's the only guy I think. Donovan Mitchell's going back to Cleveland. Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant's not worth that. Type of stuff.
Why hasn't
Kuzma's not worth that type?
Why
of
hasn't
stuff.
the Mitchell thing happened yet? Because a lot of Heat fans are holding out hope. I know what your point is a good one. That there aren't really superstar malcontents on bad teams right now. I would say there are a couple of bad teams that don't necessarily realize they're bad, but they're in unique situations. Like tell Ishbia that they're not going to be competitive. It's hard to reason with them right now. So conventional wisdom would say sit back and wait for some of these teams to do bad. However, if Miami goes another offseason with letting the rest of the Eastern Conference lap them, and even in their own division getting worse inside of that, I don't know if this fan base, which has been pretty patient with Pat, I'll take that back, hasn't been very patient. But now that the Celtics finally won their title, you're in chase mode. How logical is it that the Miami Heat are going to practice patience here? Because that will go over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, and like they might lose both Haywood Highsmith and Caleb Martin, depending on how things go. You know, the biggest thing about the Tobias Harris news that broke while we've been on here, excuse me, my first thought was, okay, well, that was a big Caleb Martin possibility. Excuse me. So, like, does he go back? I mean, the word has been he's been looking for that type of money, you know, a 2-year, $20 million a year AAV type of thing. Haywood Highsmith's looking for the full mid-level, which we talked about earlier, not necessarily so available out there. So, like the opportunity cost for them to, you know, find a richer thing somewhere else, I'm not sure that's going to be worth those guys not going back to Miami. But if they do, like, is that enough too? Like, are you, to your point, Mike, are you like, you know, parading down to the Casillas Center because you brought back Haywood Highsmith and Caleb Martin? I don't think those moves compare to what the top of the East has done. I think you're right. Like, it's going to be a matter of swallowing a patience pill and hoping that Phoenix blows up, hoping that, you know, other situations become awry. That's really what I think. That's it right now.
The good news is Miami is no stranger to swallowing pills.
Yes. Jake, we thank you for your time. Real quick, 5 seconds or less. What happens with LeBron?
He takes a pay cut depending on the caliber of guy. If they get Klay, he'll take less. But I don't think anyone like if they get Brook, you know, maybe. But
Haywood Highsmith.
He's going back to the Lakers. Yeah.
You taking a pay cut for Haywood Highsmith?
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting to the point where I'm going to start overreacting to Haywood Highsmith leaving.
Oh, my God.
If Miami keeps getting their lunch taken. Thank you so much, Jake. Check the stuff out for Yahoo Sports, senior NBA reporter.